I watched in disbelief as my sister, Marlo Trent, strutted into my apartment with a suitcase in one hand and a shopping bag in the other, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the handles. The smell of expensive perfume hit me before I even had a chance to speak. I had just returned from work, exhausted, only to find her standing there like she owned the place. "Elliot," she said, with that sly, confident smile I had hated since we were kids. "I need your help." I blinked, trying to process what she meant. "Your help with what?" I asked cautiously. "You know, with money," she replied casually, as if it were no big deal. Her voice carried that same charm she always used to get what she wanted. I swallowed hard. I knew exactly what this meant. She had already spent her entire inheritance on designer clothes, luxury vacations, and anything else that caught her fancy. And now, after weeks of seeing her accounts dwindle, she was knocking on my door to demand more. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, heart pounding. "Marlo, you've already used up everything. There's nothing left," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her smile didn't falter. "Well, I have this little trip I've been dreaming about. You know, something really special. And I thought, since you've always been so good with money, maybe you could cover it for me. Just this once." I felt a sharp twist in my chest, a mix of anger and disbelief. I had always been the responsible one, saving and planning for the future, while she lived in a bubble of indulgence. And now she had the audacity to ask me to pay for her whims. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the money, but because it reminded me of a lifetime of similar moments, childhood victories she had claimed as her own, excuses she had made while I cleaned up the messes she left behind. "I can't, Marlo," I said finally, my voice firmer than I expected. "You spent it all. This isn't fair, and it's not my responsibility." She tilted her head, a playful glint in her eyes. "Come on, Elliot. Don't be like that. You always were the serious one. I mean, can't you just help your poor sister out this once? I promise I'll pay you back, eventually." I felt my jaw tighten. I had heard that promise before, dozens of times, and it never meant anything. Yet here she was again, leaning on charm and manipulation like a safety net, trying to make me feel guilty. I wanted to scream, to throw every excuse she'd ever used back at her, but part of me just froze, remembering all the years she had gotten away with the same behavior. Her eyes sparkled, waiting, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about control. About her thinking she could step into my life and demand I bend to her wishes. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me, a need to finally stand my ground, to see just how far she would go when I refused to give in. "I said no," I repeated, my voice steadier this time. Marlo's smile faltered for a second, just enough for me to notice. Then she shrugged lightly, as if disappointed but unfazed, and said, "Fine, Elliot. But I'll figure something out, you'll see." And with that, she left, leaving me staring at the door, heart pounding, and a storm of anger, betrayal, and something darker simmering beneath the surface. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, homework spread out in front of me, while Marlo leaned against the counter, casually flipping through a magazine. Mom came in, glanced at Marlo, and said, "Such a smart girl, always so charming." I remember hiding my frustration, because I had just won the science fair, but somehow Marlo's name ended up on the certificate when she proudly showed it off to our parents. She smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that made everyone believe she was innocent, and Mom clapped and praised her. I tried to speak up, but Mom waved me off, saying, "Elliot, you're always so serious. Marlo just has a way with people." That was Marlo. Always slipping through cracks, always getting what she wanted. If she broke a vase, she'd somehow convince Dad it wasn't her fault. If she forgot her homework, she'd charm the teacher into giving her an extension. And there I was, cleaning up after her, making sure everything ran smoothly, earning every grade and every praise quietly, never expecting recognition. I could still see the way she would smile when she told little lies that made her seem better than she was. Like the time she claimed she had baked cookies for a school fundraiser when it was me who had spent the whole evening in the kitchen, and she got all the compliments. Or when she helped a classmate with a project I had actually done, then received the awards and attention. I learned early that Marlo had a way of taking credit, and I learned to bite my tongue because no one ever seemed to notice the truth. Mom and Dad's favoritism was subtle but constant. They didn't mean to hurt me, I think, but they made it clear that Marlo was the golden child. She could charm, manipulate, and mislead, and it was always forgiven, even celebrated. Meanwhile, I was the cautious one, the responsible one, the one expected to follow rules and think ahead. That pattern followed us through every stage of life, creating a quiet tension I carried in my chest, even if I never said it out loud. Now, thinking about her asking me for more inheritance, I realize it's not just money that makes me angry. It's every little moment from childhood replaying itself, the unfairness, the manipulation, the way she always got away with things while I stayed careful and responsible. The money is just a symbol of something much deeper, a lifetime of favoritism, of overlooked effort, and of constant comparison to someone who learned how to charm her way through life while leaving others to handle the consequences. I begin to understand that my frustration isn't about her trips or clothes. It's about the way she's always used her charm to bend the world to her will, while I was taught to follow rules, to save, to endure. And suddenly, this inheritance fight feels less like a dispute over cash and more like the culmination of years of resentment I didn't even realize I was holding on to. Every unfair award, every stolen moment of recognition, every lie she told without consequence, all of it is coming back to me now, tangled up in this one impossible situation where she stands in front of me asking for more, expecting me to give in like I always have. Marlo leaned back in the chair, crossing her legs like she owned the room, her eyes fixed on me with that smug, confident look she always wore. "Elliot," she began, tilting her head, "I really think you could help me out this one time. It's not much, just a little trip, and I promise I'll pay you back." I shook my head slowly. "Marlo, I can't. You've spent all your inheritance. That's it. There's nothing left for me to give." She sighed dramatically, leaning forward, placing her hands on the table. "You always think you're better than me, Elliot. Always so serious, always so responsible. You think you can handle money better, but maybe that's not fair. Maybe you should loosen up a little. Share a little of what you have." Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. It was exactly what she always did, wrap guilt around her charm and try to make you feel selfish for standing your ground. I forced myself to remain calm, keeping my hands clasped on the table, breathing through the tension. I had been through this 1,000 times before. She smiled like she was innocent, like she was the victim, but I knew better. "I'm not better than you, Marlo," I said slowly. "I'm just not reckless. You spent everything, and now you're asking me to fix it. That's not fair. That's not responsibility. You need to deal with your own mistakes." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Elliot, come on. We're family. Shouldn't you help me? Isn't that what siblings do?" I felt a flicker of something inside me shift. Family. Responsibility. Loyalty. I thought about all the times she had used those same words to manipulate me, to make me do what she wanted. And I realized I was tired of bending. Tired of letting her charm control the situation. "Family doesn't mean I have to enable you, Marlo," I said firmly. "It means I care enough to let you learn consequences. If I give you more money now, you'll never learn." She leaned back again, tapping her fingers lightly on the table. "You always make everything sound so harsh, Elliot. Why do you have to be like this? Don't you care about me at all?" I met her gaze, and for the first time, I let the thought come fully to my mind. Maybe it was time to turn this situation around. Maybe it was time to let her see what it meant to face the results of her actions. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. "You'll have to figure it out, Marlo," I said quietly, letting the words sink in. "I'm done bailing you out. You made your choices. Now you live with them." She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I could see the frustration flicker across her face, the first crack in her confident mask. And in that moment, a seed of something dark and determined planted itself inside me. A plan to make sure she finally understood the weight of her own recklessness, and that I wouldn't be the one to clean up her mess anymore. I was sorting through some old paperwork in the study when I noticed a stack of bills and statements tucked behind a drawer. At first, I thought it was nothing, just routine mail. But when I opened it, my stomach sank. Credit card after credit card, loans I hadn't even known existed, balances skyrocketing far beyond what her inheritance had been. Marlo had dug herself into a hole so deep, it made my head spin. This wasn't just splurging anymore. This was reckless, dangerous, and it wasn't only her future at risk. It threatened everything our parents had left us. I ran my fingers over the papers, trying to make sense of it. Each statement revealed purchases I couldn't even imagine. Vacations, high-end shopping sprees, exclusive memberships, even cash advances she clearly had no way of paying back. And now, all of it had her name on it. My mind raced. If she couldn't pay these debts, creditors could come after the estate. Our shared inheritance could vanish entirely if this spiraled further. I remembered Adrian Vale, our parents' old family lawyer and friend. I hadn't thought to involve him yet, but this situation demanded it. I called him immediately, voice tight with tension. When he answered, I barely explained the situation before he asked for the statements. "Elliot, this is serious," he said after a moment, scanning through the numbers over the phone. "If these debts aren't handled, the creditors could place claims against the estate. And depending on how these loans were signed, it could even put your own finances at risk if she doesn't have the means to cover them." I sat back, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I had known she was careless with money, but this level of irresponsibility was beyond anything I could have imagined. I had assumed she was just indulging herself, living extravagantly, and perhaps would face minor consequences. But this was catastrophic. My anger surged alongside my fear. She wasn't just hurting herself anymore. She was threatening everything we had, everything our parents had worked for, everything I had tried to protect. Adrian continued calmly but firmly. "You need to set boundaries. You need to make sure she understands that this isn't just a personal problem anymore. There are real legal consequences here, Elliot. And you have options." I listened, but it wasn't just the legalities that weighed on me. It was the betrayal, the recklessness, the realization that Marlowe's charm and impulsive nature had escalated to a point that could ruin both our futures. The sadness hit me harder than the anger. I thought about all the memories of her slipping by, all the years I had carried the weight of responsibility while she played the carefree role. And now, in her own careless hands, the legacy of our family was at risk. For the first time, I felt both fear and a strange determination. I couldn't let her destroy everything. I wouldn't. But I also knew that helping her blindly, giving in to guilt or habit, would only encourage more recklessness. I had to act, and I had to do it carefully, because the stakes had never been higher. Marlowe's choices were threatening more than just her own life. They were threatening our shared future, and I couldn't let that happen. I sat at my desk, spreading out every bill, statement, and receipt I had found from Marlowe's spending. Each one was a small piece of a larger picture, proof of her recklessness, her disregard for consequences. I didn't feel anger right now, not the kind that sparks shouting or confrontation. This was something colder, sharper. I needed to be methodical. I needed a plan. I started making notes, categorizing her debts by severity, identifying which creditors could make the most impact if left unpaid, and calculating how quickly her actions could collapse her lifestyle without me giving her a single cent. I double-checked every document, every figure. If Marlowe thought she could charm her way out of this as she always had, she was going to be very wrong. On the corner of my desk, I placed the broken music box from our childhood. Marlowe had smashed it in a fit of jealousy one summer when I had been praised for my piano recital. I had tried to repair it, but the damage was permanent. The memory of her betrayal, of that careless, thoughtless act, burned in me even now. It felt fitting. Just as she had destroyed something delicate then, she was now destroying the financial foundation our parents had left us. The music box became a symbol, a reminder that she never considered the consequences of her actions, and that her charm didn't erase the damage she left behind. I began to map out my approach. I wouldn't give her money, not a dollar. I would let her dig her own hole, confront the reality of her choices, and face the consequences she had ignored for so long. But it wouldn't be about cruelty. It would be about teaching her a lesson she couldn't charm or cry her way out of, a lesson about responsibility, and about the emotional cost of her selfishness. As I plotted, I imagined her panic when the first creditors called, when the luxurious trips she had booked suddenly became impossible to pay for. I imagined her frustration when she realized that she could no longer rely on me to bail her out, that her charm would fail. I could see her standing in my apartment again, looking helpless, the confident mask slipping for the first time. I wrote down step by step how I would monitor the situation, how I would document every misstep she made, and how I would hold firm. Each decision was deliberate, calculated, almost surgical. I wasn't doing this to hurt her permanently. I was doing it to make her understand, finally, that her choices have real weight and real consequences. As I looked at the broken music box again, I felt a strange satisfaction. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about accountability. It was about making her see that life doesn't bend around charm or selfishness. The plan was set. Marlowe would finally learn the cost of her actions, and it would be a lesson she couldn't ignore. Marlowe appeared at my door again, looking flustered, her eyes wide with what she hoped would be concern and sympathy. "Elliot," she said, voice trembling just enough to tug at any lingering guilt I might have felt. I don't know what to do. Something came up, and I really need your help." I studied her carefully. She held a manila envelope like it contained some terrible emergency. "What is it this time?" I asked calmly, though inside I was already bracing myself. It's serious," she continued, clutching the envelope to her chest. "One of the hotels I booked, something went wrong, and they are threatening to take everything. I don't have the money, Elliot. You have to help me." I could see her trying to recreate the charm she had always used to get what she wanted, the smile that made parents and teachers alike believe she was innocent and helpless. But now I saw it differently. I saw her panic, the cracks in her confident mask, and something in me shifted. I felt a strange satisfaction, a recognition that finally, she might not get what she wanted. "I don't think this is as serious as you're making it sound," I said slowly, keeping my tone neutral. "You've done this before, Marlo. You always exaggerate when things go wrong. You need to handle this on your own." Her face fell slightly, but she pressed on. "Elliot, remember when we were kids? That time Dad got sick, and you helped me with everything? You were always there for me. I thought you'd help me now, too." The mention of Dad and the memories of childhood tugged at something inside me, but I pushed it aside. That was exactly the kind of emotional manipulation she had used for years. I could feel her panic growing as she realized my resolve wasn't cracking. "You're testing me, Marlo," I said quietly. "You're hoping I'll bail you out again, like I always have. But this time, I'm not going to. You need to deal with the consequences of your actions." Her eyes widened, and I could almost see the gears turning in her mind as she realized I wasn't going to give in. I sensed her desperation increasing, her charm failing for the first time in years. She opened her mouth to argue, to fabricate another story about a medical emergency or financial disaster, but I didn't let her finish. "I'm not going to help you this time," I repeated firmly. "You need to learn that life doesn't bend around your mistakes. You have to face this, just like I faced the consequences of your recklessness all those years." Marlo's shoulders slumped, and I watched as she backed away from the doorway, looking helpless, the confident mask she always wore crumbling in real time. For the first time, I felt the weight of justice in my hands, and I knew she was beginning to understand that charm and lies would no longer protect her. I let her go, letting her unravel naturally, knowing this hard lesson about responsibility was one she couldn't escape, and one she needed to learn more than ever. The first call came late one night. A stern voice on the other end told Marlo she had missed another payment, that her account was overdrawn, that her landlord was considering eviction. I could hear the panic in her voice, even through the shaky charm she tried to put on. It was the first time I had ever heard real fear from her, raw and unpolished. Over the next few days, more calls arrived. Creditors, utility companies, and service providers all demanding payment. I watched her scramble, making desperate phone calls, pleading, trying to charm her way out as she always had. But for the first time, the charm didn't work. She was running out of excuses, and the reality of her reckless choices was hitting hard. I didn't interfere directly. I didn't call the creditors or step in to pay a single bill. I wanted her to feel the consequences fully, to understand what responsibility actually meant. But I made sure she had the basics: food, a place to stay, necessities she couldn't lose, because cruelty wasn't the goal. This was about accountability, about letting her experience reality without letting her life completely spiral out of control. One afternoon, Clara Winslow, my aunt and one of the few family friends who had always understood me, stopped by. She observed quietly as I went through Marlo's latest eviction notice and budget breakdown. She didn't say much at first, just watched with her calm, steady eyes. "Elliot," she said finally, in her gentle but firm voice, "you're doing the right thing." Sometimes the hardest lesson is letting someone face the consequences themselves. They have to hit rock bottom to understand, and you're giving her the chance to do that safely. Her words carried a weight I hadn't realized I needed. Clara had always been perceptive, able to see the bigger picture. Her approval didn't mean I had to soften, but it reminded me that my plan, letting Marlo unravel without stepping in to save her, was not cruel. It was careful, strategic, and necessary. I watched Marlo pacing her apartment, phone pressed to her ear, frustration and panic written all over her face. For the first time, I saw cracks in her confidence, moments when she truly questioned how she had gotten herself into this mess. And I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing she was finally learning the cost of her choices. Clara's presence reminded me that this wasn't just about winning or proving a point. It was about teaching responsibility, about making sure Marlo understood that life had consequences she couldn't charm her way out of. I stayed in the background, observing, ready to step in only to prevent complete disaster, but mostly letting her face the results of her recklessness. For the first time in years, Marlo was truly panicked, truly desperate, and truly human. The facade of control she had always relied on was crumbling, and I realized that my patience, combined with careful strategy, was beginning to shape the lesson she could never forget. Clara's nod of approval, quiet and understated, reassured me that I was doing what needed to be done. This was the start of her real downfall, and the start of her learning to face responsibility. Marlo stormed into my apartment that evening, her face red and eyes wild with frustration. She slammed the door behind her and planted herself in front of me, hands trembling. "Elliot," she shouted. "This is insane. How can you just sit there and let me suffer like this? Don't you care at all?" I took a deep breath, standing my ground. "Marlo, I do care. But caring doesn't mean bailing you out every time you make a mistake. You need to face the consequences of your actions." Her voice shook as she stepped closer. "You don't get it. You've always had it so easy, Elliot. You're disciplined, stable, everyone loves you for it. And me? I try, I fail, and you just judge me. You think you're better than me." Something inside me snapped. Years of resentment I had carried, years of being the responsible one while she charmed her way through life, spilled out in a flood of words. "Better than you," I shouted. "Marlo, I've spent my whole life cleaning up your messes, covering for your lies, while you got praised for everything. I've been the responsible one, yes, but no one ever said thank you. I've sacrificed and saved while you just took and never thought about consequences." She stumbled back, tears welling up, and for a moment, I saw the little girl I remembered, the one who always wanted more, who wanted attention and approval. Then she broke down, her voice softening. "Elliot, I've always envied you. I hate that you can be steady, calm, and everyone respects you. I hate that you're the one people rely on, and I'm always falling short. I tried to be like you, but I can't. I don't know how." I felt a pang of empathy, but I didn't let it soften my resolve. "Marlo, I understand that. But envy and charm don't fix your problems. They just push the responsibility onto someone else. I've held back my own anger and frustration for years, watching you slide through life, and I can't do it anymore. You have to learn to handle your own choices." She sniffled, shaking her head, trying to find words. I don't know if I can," she whispered, finally admitting the truth she had hidden for so long. "You can," I said firmly, stepping closer but keeping my tone calm. "But not if I keep rescuing you. You need to face this, and I'll support you where it matters, but I won't fix it for you. You're capable of more than you think, but only if you take responsibility." She sank into the couch, exhausted, tears running freely, and I could see the defeat in her posture, the loss of control she had always relied on. For the first time, I felt the balance shift between us. I wasn't just standing up to her charm and manipulation. I was asserting boundaries, reclaiming respect, and finally showing her that consequences were real. In that room, the weight of years of buried resentment, envy, and misunderstanding hung thickly in the air. But for the first time, clarity emerged. Marlo understood, on some deep level, that this wasn't about punishment. It was about truth, accountability, and finally, emotional honesty between us. Marlo moved into a small apartment, far from the luxury she had grown used to. No more fancy vacations, no more designer shopping sprees, just the basics. She called me one evening, voice quiet and hesitant, admitting for the first time that she couldn't manage on her own. "Elliot, I don't know how I let it get this bad," she said. I listened, letting her words sink in without judgment. This was the consequence she needed to feel, the reality of living within her means. I reminded her gently but firmly that any further inheritance from our parents would come with conditions. "You can't touch a dime until you prove you can handle it responsibly," I said. "I'm not trying to punish you, Marlo. I'm trying to make sure you don't destroy the rest of what we were left." She hesitated, but I could hear the understanding in her tone. For the first time, she recognized the weight of her actions and that her charm and excuses wouldn't carry her through. A few weeks later, I pulled out the broken music box from my desk, the one from our childhood, the one she had smashed in jealousy years ago. I had repaired it carefully, and now I handed it to her. I fixed this, I said quietly. I'm returning it to you. Not because I expect gratitude, but because I want you to have it back as a reminder. She looked at the music box, her fingers brushing over the delicate surface. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, I remember breaking it. I'm sorry. I nodded, feeling a strange satisfaction, not from revenge, but from the moment of acknowledgement. This was symbolic, more than just a repaired object. It was a representation of accountability, forgiveness, and the moral victory of standing firm. Over the following months, Marlo began to adjust. She found work that allowed her to live independently, learn to budget, and even apologize to some of the creditors she had wronged. It wasn't easy for her, and it wasn't glamorous, but she was finally experiencing responsibility firsthand. I offered guidance when necessary, but I never let her off the hook. She had to face the results of her own actions. One evening, we sat in the living room, the music box playing softly in the background. Marlo looked at me, a mix of humility and recognition in her eyes. Elliot, I see now. You've always been stronger than me, not in charm or words, but in standing firm, in making the hard choices. I've underestimated you for so long. I smiled faintly, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and finally seeing the sister I had always hoped she could become. Our relationship shifted in that moment. No more manipulation, no more blind indulgence. We had redefined what it meant to be family, honest, accountable, and capable of learning from past mistakes. For the first time, I felt peace. Marlo had lost her extravagance, yes, but she had gained awareness. And I had regained the balance and respect I had waited years to claim. The music box sat between us, quiet and whole, a symbol of lessons learned and boundaries finally honored. A year passed before I realized how much had changed. The chaos, the tension, and the sleepless nights had finally settled into quiet reflection. I still lived in the same apartment, still worked the same job, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. The bitterness that once burned inside me had turned into calm understanding. I had fought a battle that wasn't about money, but about respect and truth, and I had finally won, not by revenge, but by letting Marlo face herself. She was different now. Not completely changed, but quieter, more aware. She visited me sometimes, always a little nervous, always carrying herself with humility I hadn't seen before. Her clothes were simple, her voice softer. She talked about the small things, her job at the local bookstore, the way she was saving for the first time, how strange it felt to budget instead of spend without thinking. She still had traces of her old charm, but now it came with restraint, a kind of gentleness that came from learning the hard way. One evening, she came by with takeout and sat across from me at the table. We ate in silence for a while before she said, "You know, Elliot, I used to think you just liked controlling things. But now I see you were trying to keep things from falling apart. I should have listened sooner." Her words carried no defense, just quiet honesty. I nodded, appreciating that she was trying, even if part of me still felt the sting of old wounds. After she left that night, I walked into my study and looked at the music box on my desk. It sat there, still and peaceful. I opened it, and the soft tune filled the room, the same one I had listened to as a child. I remembered all the years of frustration, of feeling unseen, and how everything had led to this point. The scars from Marlo's betrayals were still there, faint but real. Some parts of me would probably never heal completely. But for the first time, I felt peace in accepting that. I realized then that standing up for myself had come with a cost. It had strained the last bit of family I had left, forced me to confront painful memories I had buried for years. But it had also freed me. I had drawn a line, and for once, I hadn't let guilt or obligation push me past it. That victory wasn't loud or grand. It was quiet and steady, like the ticking of a clock after years of chaos. Marlo and I would never have the kind of relationship people write about in perfect family stories. We were too different, shaped by too much imbalance. But we had reached a fragile peace, built on honesty instead of illusion. I could live with that. As the last notes of the music box faded, I closed the lid and smiled faintly. Some betrayals never disappear completely. They just stop hurting as much. And in that silence, I understood something I never had before. Closure isn't about forgetting what someone did to you. It's about finally being able to move on without carrying the weight of it anymore. And at last, I had.